Hello, everyone. Welcome, beautiful people. This is the second session of The Wisdom of the Hive. It's a three-part series conceived by Michelle Cassandra Johnson and Reimagine to face our fear, pain, and grief, and to see bees as guides towards a future of greater connection, greater collaboration, and belonging. We're feeling the sting of collective grief, and three of our guests tonight are North Carolinians, and they're particularly feeling the sting tonight. But at the same time, we can also savor the sweetness that comes with being part of a hive that thrives. If y'all can turn on your cameras, it would be great to see you. If you can't, we understand. For those who don't know, Reimagine is a nonprofit that brings people together in facing grief, loss, adversity, and mortality. We encourage our participants to take small, sweet steps and to pace ourselves as we channel life's individual and collective challenges into meaningful action and growth. Everyone here is welcome. We're eager to gather folks of diverse backgrounds, ages, races, immigration status, people of faith, people of no faith, everyone is welcome. At Reimagine, we transform grief into growth, turning life's hardest moments into opportunities for creativity, connection, and flourishing. Now, a little hive keeping. I want to tell you what kind of space this is. It's a space that cultivates compassion for others and for ourselves. Most of us have arrived here with some kind of pain in our hearts. So let's be compassionate with one another. Let's choose to respect and welcome everyone gathered here. This space isn't perfect. We might fumble, we might falter, we might offend, but we ask for your grace. What kind of space this isn't? It's not about blaming. It's not about imposing belief systems on others. It's not about providing solutions or fixing things. Another thing I want to emphasize is that although this is not a political space, it is a space to cultivate social justice. Our colleague Mazen Jamal has offered this definition of justice. Quote, "It's an environment of integrity and wholeness, achieved through healing and transformation. When justice is present, we can trust that our safety and our well-being are valued in a community or society." End of quote. So this is our aspiration for tonight. What is going to unfold? The program is about 90 minutes long. The centerpiece is Michelle's conversation with our very special guests, Omisade Burney-Scott, Ariella Daly, and Aditi Sethi, who you heard earlier on the harmonium. You'll hear more from Aditi later. We'll set aside some time for questions from you after the conversation. So if something is bubbling up for you as you listen to our speakers, please add to the chat a question, because I'll be collecting those and feeding them to our speakers for the Q&A portion. And then we will end with a mindfulness practice led by Michelle. So now, without further ado, Michelle Cassandra Johnson is an author, activist, spiritual teacher, racial equity consultant, an educator, and intuitive healer. She's a Reimagine collaborator. She has led transformative work dismantling racism and systems of oppression, disrupting the wellness industry to make it more inclusive and accessible, creating space for healing in myriad ways, and through her work for over 2 decades as a clinical social worker. Michelle's work centers on healing from individual and collective trauma, returning to wholeness, and aligning the mind, body, spirit, and heart. I want to thank Michelle's publisher, Sounds True, for helping to spread the word about this series, because she has a new book, The Wisdom of the Hive, in case you didn't know. My colleague Nicole Tan, who's helping out tonight, will be pasting a link in the chat for a discount code for those interested in the book. Michelle, before we begin, I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about last month's session. We had Lama Rod Owens in conversation with you, and Lama Rod described the collective grief we're experiencing as apocalyptic, meaning all these systems that we have known so well have collapsed. But at the same time, we're learning something with that disruption, with that falling apart. Something is getting revealed. It's teaching us something. Is apocalyptic grief a term that resonates with you?
Thanks, Andy, for your question and bringing the energy of Lama Rod into this space. And oftentimes, and many people have talked about this before, but when we think about the word apocalypse, we think of ending. And in fact, it means revelation. So, this uncovering of what is present and also often what needs to be shed or let go. And so, yes, the term apocalyptic grief does resonate during this time where so much is shifting shape and form. And I think when we are gaining more clarity about right action and alignment, and also, at least in my own experience, I'm being asked, what I'm willing to risk for liberation, like tangibly, what am I materially, physically, emotionally, spiritually, what am I willing to risk? So yes, it definitely resonates and it fits into the themes for our conversation tonight. And Andy, would you like me to go ahead and dive into that? Great. I want to thank Let's Reimagine for helping to dream up this series based on the wisdom of the hive. And tonight, I want to offer gratitude to Omisade, Aditi, and Ariella for joining me. We're going to get into a really, I think, informative and juicy conversation around the following themes. We will talk about transition in the way I just named, what is being revealed now, what we notice, death and birth and rebirth. We will also talk about portals, and actually the contemplative practice that I will guide is a practice from the wisdom of the hive based on the portal of this time and the portals we are in these vessels, in these bodies. We'll also talk about the importance of time traveling and realm traveling and being psychopumps or engaging that archetype as bees are able to, yes, help souls once they've departed from the physical body and also work in different realms. And as I thought about tonight and coming into this space, I am tending a hive right now. A hive I actually had to combine with another hive because I noticed a couple weeks ago this hive was just a tiny cluster, which the cluster wasn't big enough or going to be big enough going into winter. And so unexpectedly, I had to combine them with a hive right next to them. And I did that, and I've been watching since then. This is also a time in North Carolina, October and November, where there are other bees who are preparing for winter, who want to make sure they have enough resources. And often we call them robber bees, or I call them hungry bees, because they are going to gather honey from other hives that may not be as strong, and they take that honey back to their hives. And so I've noticed with this hive that I've combined this more robbing activity. I think, although it's hard to tell what's going on, and I think that's also representative of the time we're moving through, this apocalyptic time, this time of great change, this time when death and birth and shedding and letting go and new things are emerging all at the simultaneously. And so today I was out in the bee yard and I multiple times watching this hive, and I'm trying to figure out if they are transitioning. Now that I've combined them, I'm still trying to figure out if the hungry bees, the robber bees, are taking over this hive or not. And the reason why it's confusing is because there are bees that go into this combined hive with pollen in their pockets. And to me, that's a sign that they are still maintaining the hive. They are taking resources into the hive. They are active in that way, even as these hungry bees there's some fighting that's happening in front of the hive. And so, and Ariella can share some about this. As a beekeeper, there can be this experience where I'm not sure, one, because I'm not a bee, and I'm looking at them with human eyes, right? And two, because they continue to work until they transition, even if the whole hive transitions and dies and doesn't make it through a season. And winter's often that time when that can happen. It can be really difficult to tell what's going on. So I thought it was really interesting that I was then going to come into this space where we're going to talk about transition and death and birth and rebirth and what we notice and experience and how we can gather information from the past and bring it into the now to support us now, but also into the future as I witness this hive where I'm trying to figure out if they are going to thrive, if they will live, or if they're in the process of transitioning. And maybe that happens simultaneously too. And we can think about this in our human bodies. I am aging and changing and dying in this moment as I am talking to you right now. And so maybe it's like that with this hive. I'm unsure. The other thing I want to share about these themes we're going to talk about that also feels really like interesting synchronous timing is um, my mother is not well, and there's stories of my hives. I've lost two hives before when my mother wasn't well, and actually close to when we thought she would transition, although she didn't transition. She's still here. This was in 2019 and 2020 when I lost hives during the winter time while my mother was sick. And so um, I'm also thinking about the bees' work and even how they came to me in a dream when my mother was sick, and how one explanation a friend gave me was that the bees were present to help my mother transition. And so I've been in this dance with these bees, right? These beings for many, many years now, where they show up in this period of transition specific to my mother and her health and wellness. And often the meaning I've made of that is the bees are wise. They understand things I don't. They also understand right timing. And they have the will and awareness and presence and talent to help us move through apocalyptic times and change and transition and death and destruction, even as they continue to work and sustain the hive until the end. So that's what I'm coming in with right now. And also, I'm going to invite us to really consider how we can cultivate a skill of being with the both and maybe the many truths that emerge right now, the being with the polarities of death um, and of life and what it means to be among the living, and what it means to also yes, grieve what we are losing, because we need to do that. That's part of the medicine. That's also part of the alchemy, and also um, I think appreciate these lives that we have, even in the most tense times, um, because I think it can be really difficult to human in these bodies and to stay centered and grounded when things feel as if they are unraveling. And what can we hold on to as the unraveling occurs? and what can help us ground and center in that. And my hope is through this conversation and this, it's more than a conversation. I mean, being here feels like weaving together some magic. My hope is that we, through our conversation and through all of the medicine that will be offered tonight, that we offer a balm or a salve for whatever grief might be present in your heart, specific to what you are wading through and moving through and the details of your life, and also within the collective. And happy to be here with you. And I think with that, I want to invite Aditi, you to share a little bit about the song you wish to sing, and then to invite your voice into this space in that way.
Thank you so much. The song I wish to share today echoes so many of the themes that I've already heard and that we'll continue to explore together this evening. It's a song I recently heard by a duo called Mamuse, and it's called We Shall Be Known. And it references a concept of the great turning that Joanna Macy coined. She was a social activist, author, and recently took her final breath from this realm. And I'll sing it 3 times, and I invite you just to receive it the first time, sing along if you feel called, and join in anytime you feel. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. One more time. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into this time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
All of the ascending hearts and all of the ascending honey and the bees and the magic. Thank you, Aditi, for sharing your voice and that song with us, inviting us into the energy of that. Yeah. So I want to invite Omisade, Ariella, and Aditi, you all to call yourselves into the space and to share some about who you are. Any way you want to answer that. For me, that answer changes day to day. And also, I shared some about what is present for me and the letting go and the transitions. And I'd love for you all to speak to that and some of the themes that I raised as you introduce yourselves. So maybe we can go to you, Omisade, first, and then Ariella, and back to you, Aditi.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I've been thinking a lot about how I wanted to introduce myself. So I'm going to share with you an introduction that I used last summer with the Black Feminist Future when they were headed to the Outer Banks of North Carolina. So I'll do it that way. I am the daughter of two waters, sweet water and salt, river and ocean. My North Carolina ancestors hail from Craven, Pitt, Lenore, Jones, Pamlico, Greene, Hyde counties, and have rallied to greet you and your people this evening. I am a descendant of Mary and William, Annie and Jacob, Irma and John, Mary and Oliver, Louisa and Louis, Alice and Major, Virtue and William, Elizabeth and Amos, Janie and Jacob, and Dorcas and William Bartlett. The most distant relatives that I have found are my third paternal great-grandparents, Dorcas and William Bartlett Gibbs, who were born into slavery between 1812 and 1816 near Swan Quarter in the Pamlico Sound in Hyde County. They were married on August 31st, 1866, when Dorcas was 50 and William was 54. Together, they had 14 children, including my great-great-grandmother Alice, who was the mother of my great-grandmother Louisa, known as Ma Lou, who was the mother of my grandmother Annie, who was the mother of my father, William George. I am a priestess of the Orisha Oshun and the ancestors Egungun in the Ifa Sheshe tradition of Southwest Nigeria and Benin. I am a death doula. I am a mom. I am a sister. I am a best friend. I am a menopausal midwife, and I am the founder and the chief menopausal steward of the Black Girl's Guide to Surviving Menopause. And I'm grateful to be with you all this evening.
Thank you, Omisade. So glad to be in space with you. Yeah, Ariella.
That was powerful. That was cool. Hi, I'm Ariella. Oh, that actually brought me back to my what would you call it? I was pregnant during the pandemic and had a child on my own, and had a group of people together, and my sisters came forward and just read my lineage of matrilineal lineage on both sides. And I haven't heard something like that since then. And it's just so powerful to call our people to us. Thank you for that introduction. I'm Ariella, and today, Michelle, I was processing honey from a hive that transitioned from hungry bees. And I too was not sure if they were transitioning or if they were at their ends, because bees don't stop until they go to the next place. And just thinking about, this was the mother hive of my apiary, and they produced, hint, I'm a beekeeper, everyone. They produced all of this incredible abundance through swarming and birthing all my other colonies. And they've now transitioned. And so feeling that lineage as it goes, but not feeling grief, because I have this abundance that these wild bees brought to my apiary. I'm Ariella. I'm a beekeeper. I'm a mama. I'm a musician, and I spend a lot of time dreaming. Quite literally, I teach dream work, and I love dreaming and working with dreams because they are an avenue to our animist nature, that we are of the earth and we are of our ancestors and we are of our descendants. Even if you never have children, you are an ancestor to them. And that when we dream actively, we can tie ourselves into the threads of that weave. And it was the bees who brought me there through sending me dreams. And so that's my journey. I do a tremendous amount of work with honeybees, but not in quite such a linear way. Yeah, it's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Ariella. So glad you're here.
Mhm.
Aditi.
Yes. Hello, my name is Aditi, and I am a mother, a musician, end-of-life doula, hospice and palliative care, medical doc. And I have founded and I'm the director, though not really directing, it's guiding a vision called the Center for Conscious Living and Dying here in the Asheville area. And 4 years ago, I left my career as I knew it to embark on this unknown path that has been so magical and has guided me to this conversation today, among many other things along the way. And what the work of the center is, which is still very much emerging, is to really heal our relationship with death and dying, and to support people to remember that we inherently have the skills and the wisdom to tend to those that we are privileged to be with on their walk towards their last breath, their journey to death. And it's really a community-supported end-of-life care model that we are experimenting with, and part of the Omega Home Network, which is a group of homes that offer end-of-life care support, caregiving support to those who are dying. And yeah, we're exploring all these themes about what conscious living really is, and what does it mean to have the awareness that we are all passing through, and how do we show up and rally around a dying person and their families, and what does that do for us in our living days? What we're finding is it's quite profound. And when individuals bring their gifts to a collective purpose, shared purpose. So I'll leave it at that. But it's an honor to be here with you all.
Thank you, Aditi. So glad to be in space with you. And thank you all for the powerful and potent work you and practice. It's not work, I'm saying that word, but that's not what I mean. That you all do, the magic, the alchemy, the practice, the wisdom you bring in. And, you know, the themes we're exploring, we've already gotten into around death and transition and change, really and also how we live. What does that mean? And so I'd love for each of you to share some, and you can do this as you feel moved. Of course, the honeybees are the lens that we're using, and I recognize you may have a relationship with many other parts of the more than human world. And so I want to invite you to share some about what you have learned or are learning now about birth and death from the more than human world, that lens, that perspective that we are a part of. So I'd love to begin or continue and journey into that conversation, birth and death, and what do we learn from the more than human world about this relationship between the two?
What's coming through for me to share is having been in a pretty traditional allopathic, modern medical world of dying for so long, and branching out of that, I have my heart and my soul have opened up to this, to be even able to explore this conversation. I mean, this question. And I have been so privileged to be in a space where we have a property called the sanctuary, and it's a portal. I mean, it's beautiful, nestled in the mountains of these old hills. And we get to, when we are tending to those who are dying and at that threshold, we get to watch nature respond. The animal beings, the wind, the fire, the elements, everything is so heightened and profound in this container. Undeniably so. I was singing a song. We do a crossing fire when people are in their final days of life, and tended to 24/7 by fire keepers. And I was at the crossing fire singing a song to ancestors, and 13 condors, vultures came and circled as the song was being sung, and then they left as quickly as they came when the song ended. And so that's just one example of the countless interactions and exchanges that I've experienced on that land and in this service. And so I just wanted to name that. That's what was coming through, is the gift of stilling myself enough and the community enough to where we can appreciate these exchanges and these moments. Someone brought 2 beehives to our land, and so I'm learning a little bit. I don't have any experience with bees, but the woman who's tending to them said that they can teach us so much about community. And so I love this conversation, and I love remembering that we are a part of nature, not separate from it. And that seems to bring a sense of peace, and it resources us as we're tending to those who are dying, to not look at it as a failure of our medical system or something to pity, but this natural, sacred part of this existence. And it shifts everything. It shifts the energy at the bedside when death is approached that way. So, yeah.
Thank you, Aditi. We're going to talk about psychopomps, but vultures are also psychopomps like the bees. So I know that you were talking about many parts of the more than human world, like all of the elemental energy and the beings. And I was not surprised when you said the vultures showed up, right? And how they're in communication with us and attuned to and aware every part of the more than human world, even more so sometimes, right, than I am as a human in this body. The wisdom of the more than human world. So thank you for sharing that. I saw you, Ariella, unmute, and I think I did. If
You did, yeah.
Omisade, or okay, great.
Yeah. This is the work I do with the bees, so it's sort of it's an automatic for me to talk about. But I've been really surprised over the years. At first, when you lose a hive, when a hive dies, and for a lot of my students, I teach a lot of people beekeeping, there's this incredible, intense grief and sense of failure. People often want to give up. I did it all wrong. And I've lost a lot of hives over the years, especially because I don't use chemical treatments in my bees. I spend a lot of time talking with them, and they really ask me not to do that, so I don't do that. But they're constantly dying, constantly. And we think of them as a creature of life. We think of them as abundance. If you look at the mythological record, there's just stories upon stories of abundance and bees and honey and the sweetness of life and birth and all of that come out in the spring. But they're constantly shedding, they're constantly dying. Individual bees are dying all the time. They don't die in the hive, they die out in the field, away from the hive, so their sisters don't have to do the work of carrying them out and being undertakers. And then every time a beehive swarms, it's dying to what it was in order to be able to be born. And then on top of that, the hives are dying, and we've got our big slogan, save the bees, save the bees, save the bees, save the bees. And I'm just not entirely sure that that's the right slogan, right? Or if that's even the right lens to look at it through. The bees are dying, but they're mirroring the times we are in. They are dying as one of the many beings waking us up to the cycles that we're entwined with. We are entwined with bees, and you hear the thing, the bees go, we go, and it's true, but it's not quite as black and white as that. It's that they're the kind of knocking on our door. And I think a lot of the species in the world are doing that. And every time you open the aperture of your heart and your vision just a little bit towards that, you realize this just feel welcoming. It's not just 13 vultures, it's 13 local vultures who are aware of you and have been tracking this experience that they're in the weave with. We treat it as sort of these like faraway magical experiences when we have an encounter with a coyote or a beehive, but they are already in our field. They're already entwined with the local landscape, and bees are constantly dying and being born again and showing us that it's just always happening, and one is never complete without the other one already starting. You don't die without the birth already happening. You're not born without a death happening at the same time, but it's so visceral. It's not imagined anymore. You're seeing it. I think that's what happens when we start to connect with the more than human world and ourselves as part of that, part of the nature.
Thank you. Yeah, Omi. Thank you, Ariella.
Yeah, no, that was really powerful in thinking about the interconnectedness. One of the things that I think about often is our attachment as human beings to the binary. We have been raised in a society where we are taught things are either this or that, not this and that, and then a multitude in between the this and the that. And so I think when my journey has allowed me, both from a spiritual practice, from a social justice practice, and a cultural practice, to not accept the binary, and to live in the in-between spaces, and to relish the questions that exist inside the in-between spaces. So I was thinking about a couple of things. The first thing I was thinking about, we recently hosted a conference on menopause for the global majority called Iranti Eje, which means remembering blood in the Yoruba language. And we had several midwives and full spectrum doulas participate in the conference. And on the last day, a local midwife here in Durham, where I live, her name is Tina Brima, she gave me my first High John the Conqueror root. So for folk who are not familiar with High John is a root that is often used in hoodoo practice. And though I am an African traditional religion practitioner, I have a deep ancestral lineage in hoodoo that I have not tapped into until recently. And so on the last day, she came to me and she said, I have something for you. And when I opened it up, I was like, what is this? And she said, that's High John. And I said, I've read about High John. High John is known as, in folklore, as a character that is very akin to a trickster, also very much a courageous, confident, gifted storyteller, and also brings good luck, brings love, brings pleasure, brings connection. And so she gave me this. The day after the conference, I got the call to witness a dear friend make her transition. So for the next 5 days, we were waiting, we were witnessing. And one thing that I do, if somebody gives me a gift, I will place it with my shrine to introduce it to my shrines. I need you to understand that this house and where I live and where my family lives is an altar, and there are consecrated shrines in our home. So I introduced Hi John to my shrines, and I promise you I could hear my grandmother and my great-grandmother say, "Well, hey, Hi John, how you doing? It's been a long time. It's been a long time." And Hi John was like, "Hey, Annie. Hey, Irma. Hey, Malu. It's been a long time." She finally brought me into the house. So the next day I get up and I'm putting on my whites, and I'm calling my friend to let her know that I'm on my way, and I'm saying my prayers to Oshun and to my Gungun, which is that means ancestors, and also to Eshu, who is the deity inside of Orisha worship that has multiple avatars, one of which is an avatar that sits in the gate of the cemetery. I said, I'm getting ready to do this again. And I could hear Hi John being like, "Psst, hey, I'm going with you, right?" And I was like, "You just got here. You just got here." Hi John was like, "Put me in your pocket. Put me in your pocket. I'm gonna go with you. I'm older than you are. Put me in your pocket." So I did. And when I got to my friend's home, I told her, I said, "Listen, I have something in my pocket I want to let you hold while we talk, as I put up an ancestor altar, because one of my practices as an end-of-life doula is to create a temporary holding space so the ancestors are waiting, right?" So I'm talking to her and she's holding Hi John on her chest. And I could hear Hi John say, "Open the window. It is very, very dank in here. We need some energy moving in here." So we opened the window. And over the next 5 days, we watched and we waited and we sang and we touched and we caressed and we remembered and we encouraged. And on that last day, as she was so close, we were like, "You are doing such an amazing job." The wind in the room was so sweet. It was almost, I don't know if you've ever smelled like, jasmine at night, because, there's certain flowers that are so high at nighttime, but this is not jasmine season. This is not jasmine season, but I could smell the sweetness in the air, which to me felt like confirmation that her people had arrived, that they had made their journey. I talked to my ancestors. My parents have been ancestors for quite some time. They're very busy ancestors. And so I will often ask them, "Can you stand with so-and-so's ancestors?" And they're like, "Of course, tell me their name. What's going on? What's the situation?" And I felt like they had journeyed and made their way to the room. And the room got really, really quiet. And that little bit of air was coming in through the window, and it was sweet. It was oh so sweet. So I was thinking about that. And the second thing I was thinking about as it relates to bees, um, to be sure, thinking about the healing property of honey. People talk about honey as, the sweetness of life, abundance. In so many cultures, it is attached to different deities or divine or sacred ritual, right? But it's also medicinal, right? It heals wounds. It heals wounds. And birthing is hard work. It can often leave your body wounded and in need of recovery, which is why lying in confinement times are so critical, and us trying to reimagine and reclaim that lying in confinement time in that postpartum time. And I think that we need to reimagine lying in confinement times as people have made their transition for the loved ones that are still here in the living world. And that wound and the honey, that medicinal property that honey offers, I'm thinking about what's possible with that. So that's what came up for me.
Thank you so much. Yeah, for everything you all just shared and the weaving we're doing here and the um, connection between birth and death and the way and these cycles, right? These natural cycles and the different ways we can work with them. And um, I'm thinking about what you said, Omisade, about honey and the medicine of it, and also something I've written about in the Wisdom of the Hive is venom, and how that um, is alchemical as well, and how bees create the honey in collaboration with the more than human world and the elemental energies, and also embody this venom for protection. So they have a relationship with these things that feel like they're in opposition, but actually I think they're in deep relationship, just like birth and death. And I'm thinking about what you all shared and the different ways you've sat with humans and the more than human world during death or transition or letting go and birth, and through all the wounds. And wonder if each of you might share about, I mentioned bees are psychopomps, and I shared vultures are too, and there are plants that are psychopomps as well, that help souls leave the body and transition to the next place. Um, and I also think about psychopumps as like working between realms. And so I think that's something we need to do now, because we're also in different realms at the same time. And in my experience, we are, and opening to that feels like an important practice. So I wonder if you all might share some about the importance of being able to work between realms. I don't mean transcend the relative plane. I just mean, how can we be here and also recognize we are more than what is happening here? And how might that aid us given the unraveling? Yeah, see you, Omi.
I'm a little obsessed with liminal spaces. Liminality, I don't know. Y'all, I'm obsessed with liminality and in all aspects, right? In all aspects. I'm beginning a journey that I think I know what's going to happen, but I actually don't know what's going to happen until I get there. And so everything I think about of becoming being in the iterative nature of becoming yourself, in the iterative nature of evolving, there's liminality packed into everything. And I think that the work that I have done around aging reproductive bodies, um, and bodies that experience menopause for vast and sundry reasons, whether that's chronological age or gender affirming care or hysterectomies, there's liminality involved in that. There is a transition, a dying, a shedding, and then there's an in-betweenness. And the in-betweenness, for me, is a really powerful, difficult, um, potent, important, curious, courageous space. And I think that everyone should have a support. So when we were talking, so the idea of the cycle pumps was really so exciting for me, because I didn't know that bees were cycle pumps. So color me known at this big age of 58 that I can say that. um, but it made me think about the non-human psychopumps that exist in Orisha worship. So there is an Orisha by the name of, or who is known by the name of Oya. And for those who are familiar with African traditional religion, the Orisha Oya is known for several reasons. Um, they are gendered as female. Yes, this is a 9-year, Oya's number is 9. 9 is also the number of the ancestors. Um, she is a warrior. She is a queen. She is a fighter. She is the wind. She is the hurricane. She is also the owner of the Ile Eku, which means the house of the dead or the cemetery. So Oya is breath. So the first breath you take when you are born, that is Oya. The last breath you take when you die, that is Oya. And so Oya plays a very, very, very critical role in that liminal space of the arrival. I felt Oya's presence in the room when we lifted that window and the wind came in. I said, Oya is in the room. She is tending. She is tending. So like the description that I have read about various psychopomps from different cultures is that there is no judgment. That is not the job, the role, the stewardship of the psychopomp. It is to do its job. It's to do its job. If you are leaving, I am to assist you in your leaving. I am to be your guide. I don't need to know anything else but that. You're leaving, I'm your guide. I will get you to the next place. And that's what I do. Also in Orisha worship, as I said previously, Eshu has multiple avatars, and one of the avatars, Gedi Nimbo, also sits with Oya as you make transitions. So there are all of these helpers that witness actively, support actively, sit in the discomfort that you might be in the liminal space, and sit with you, wait with you, walk with you, get in the bed with you. And I think that's really, really powerful. And when I've been thinking about the liminality of transitions, my friend who just recently made her transition also wouldn't necessarily consider herself a practicing Buddhist, but definitely studied. We have been holding space for her bardo and the liminal space. And so each day we are day 48 of her bardo will be on December the 8th. So each morning we get up, we remind her that she's dead. We have a prayer that we say every morning to her. You're dead. You died. And you are in the liminal space. And the things that you are seeing are projections of your mind. They are not real. They are yours. But you are dead and you can't go back. So keep going towards the light, which is your enlightened mind, right? Every day, that's what we are offering her. So we are acting in a way as psychopomps, like humanistic psychopomps, right? Where we're like, we keep a light, I keep a candle lit, right? To illuminate her path. I have asked my people to walk with her people who her father is a new ancestor. So he's still finding his way, so he's not an OG ancestor. He hasn't figured it out yet. So we needed some OG ancestors to be like, no, that way. Keep going that way. I think there's so much power in the liminal, so much power. And to take it from death and dying to the idea of transitions, every 7 years, your body sheds of all the skin. You have brand new skin, right? Every 7 years, this is new skin. This is new me. This is new hair. This is new skin. This is new me. And in the work that I've been doing around menopause, which has been so problematized and stigmatized and made scary for all the reasons that patriarchy and misogyny and white supremacy does for anyone who has a uterus and a womb. What we do is we help people get comfortable in the liminal space as much as they can, right? And also reminding people that sometimes the liminal space is not for answers. Sometimes the liminal space is for you to bow at the feet of the question, to really make yourself comfortable with the question that you might not get an answer to. Not everything will have an answer, and not every answer is for you, or not every answer is for you to share with someone else. Sometimes it's just for you. And I think that we live in a world, as a Gen Xer, I came up in, an analog world, and then I moved into a digital world. And in this digital world, people want to know something and they want to know it now, and they want to know it with certainty, and they want to be able to share it immediately. And sometimes that's not what it's supposed to be. Sometimes you need to sit with that question. I wish I could take credit for my growing understanding of the sacredness of the question. Prentice Hemphill says that all the time. If you're not familiar with Prentice Hemphill, they are one of the founders of the Embodiment Institute. And Prentice's book last year when they were on their tour, they talked about the sacredness of the question and being comfortable with sitting with questions that you may not get the answer to. And I think that's death. People want to know, what is it like? What's going to happen? Where do we go? Do we go anywhere? How will I feel? Will it hurt? Will I be scared? And these are all really good questions. And we may not be able to answer any of these questions with any certainty, and you're still going to die. So it's okay to bow at the feet of the question and to have good psychopumps with you who will walk with you while you are kneeling at the feet of the question. So.
Thank you, Omisade, for all of that, all of who you are, all of the medicine and wisdom. And I'd love to hear your wisdom, Ariella and Aditi, related to psychopumps, realms, what's coming up for you, all the things.
Wow, just soaking all that in. That's so powerful. You know, I'll share a personal story that's coming up for me. It's alive for me. In relation to this liminal space and in relation to such the loving act, as I heard you speak to lighting a candle for your loved one and ushering them on, you know, and supporting them through this whatever journey they're on, which we don't really truly cognitively know. I'm reminded of when my father died last year. Me and my father were really tight, soulmate, and he fell picking flowers off a rock ledge in his home in Asheville and had a traumatic brain injury, hit a rock, and ended up in the ICU for 2.5 weeks. And those 2.5 weeks, he was unconscious, or not. For all I knew, he was hovering over his body, watching everything. But I happened to have a die before I die ceremony for me scheduled while he was in a coma. And I experienced communication. I mean, this was just the observer and no beliefs around this. This is just what I experienced. And it was pure love and consciousness. You know, I could feel his consciousness outside of his body. This is my father who I've known all of this, you know, human life. And I've known him in the musical space. And as you all know who are musicians, there is a language that, you know, is its own experience and magic. And so I know that connection with my father. And it was the same. And he was not responding in the physical body while he was in a coma. And so that was profound. Just that knowing in my bones that he was somewhere, you know, whereas the doctors would say he's not hearing, he's not, you know, all that stuff that you hear, that you know. And then so he ended up, we extubated him. He was very clear. If you have to wipe my ass, let me go. Like, never wanted to be a vegetable. And he was clearly on the path of a long recovery, if at all. So we decided to move to comfort care, extubated him, and actually moved him to the sanctuary where he ultimately took his final breath, held by this tremendous loving community. I was held. And after he died, I want to back up. While he was in a coma, I happened to be on a panel with a neuroscientist who is spending her whole life researching whether or not consciousness exists outside of the brain. And she says, if I can't find it, it doesn't exist. And she's debated Deepak Chopra. So she's a powerhouse. And here I am having this mystical experience with my father saying, I know, but I couldn't speak to all that, of course. I said I shared my experience, but whether it was met or not, I don't know. So that was an interesting little synchronistic happening along the way. But after he died, I was scheduled to support be a part of a communal ceremonial grief concert that we offer to support communal grieving. And I decided to do it, continue to participate in this experience. And during that ceremony, I felt his soul, and I felt that all this love and all my tears, I just could not stop wailing as the music carried me, and I could feel his soul. I could feel his presence, and I was just orienting him. I mean, I was having this, profound experience of his crossing and this desire, natural desire to support him. If I had stopped or been in my mind about it or intellectualize it, it might not have been the same. But the grief was just so overwhelming for me that I was just in the direct experience of love and connection to his soul. And so that's what's coming through, just the gift of this conversation to open people's hearts and minds to this awareness. So many people don't carry it, and so many of us aren't taught to explore these realms together in community. And so that's what's alive for me to share.
Thank you, Aditi. Ariella, thank you for sharing that in your heart with us and that story. Ariella.
I find it fascinating that that's the story you chose, because what was coming up was a lot of myth and the death of my father. Bees as psychopomps, there's the knowledge of it. So I'm a nerd for folklore. That's what got me into this from the beginning. I found out about these Melissa bee priestesses in ancient Greece, and that led me down the road to bees. And why were they called bee priestesses? And why are they connected to the Delphic Oracle? And why was the Delphic Oracle, who lasted for over 1,000 years, this woman, this postmenopausal woman in her priestesshood known as the bee, the Melissa, what does she have to do with, for instance, Persephone, who was also known as a bee? And it turns out when we look at things like the myth of Persephone, we know it. We know the abduction. We know the horrors. We know she was taken into the underworld and went through her Inanna experience and became the queen of the dead. But we don't know, or we often don't think about how myths are living things that are always changing. And they're being changed not just by us, but by cultural movements and the movements of rivers and mountains and waters and birds and them themselves and the deities, the presences behind them. They're all moving together. And so if you look at ancient Greek myth, where there's a tremendous amount of lore around bees, which then you also find in so many places similar things. Germanic myths around bees as psychopomps, and Celtic myths around bees as psychopomps. But here you find this being who is like a swarm of her mother, Demeter, who was in the process of remaking herself, rebirthing herself, which is what bees do. They rebirth themselves into a new form, mother hive, daughter hive. So here she is rebirthing herself. And one of the oldest myths about Persephone is that she was in the process of rebirthing herself, and she became aware of lost souls who had died and did not know how to get to the underworld. And what was the underworld? The place of the ancestors, which is why the oracles were often associated with the underworld, because who do you go to? Beyond the deities, you go to the underworld. You go to the ones who've done it before, the ones who remember. So she asked her mother, she actually volunteered. She said, I will be their midwife. I, who will be named Honey-like, named after my mother as the bee, Demeter, the Melissa. I, who will be named Honey-like, will go in to the underworld. I will live there. I will guide them. I will become the midwife. I will become the psychopomp. So that's one of her origin myths that people don't know about. You have these priestesshoods of women who connected to bees, tending bees, connected to the birth and the death process, one and the same, connected to prophecy, talk about liminality, going into oracular states. We don't just look at it as far future seeing, but to see what is, to converse with. To me, that liminal state is a place where profound conversation happens. And so where this ties into my father is that I knew all that. I was versed. I was in the lore. But there's one thing to be in the lore and another thing to experience it. And the night before he died, he was in hospice, and I was asleep, and he was at home. And we had this thing, the same thing. My dad and I, we would share dreams and adventures and stories and all the things. He was my mystic, mystic dad. And the night before he died, I dreamt that a little boy was at the shore, and it was my father as a little boy, and he was walking too far into the sea, and he started to get pulled out. So I dove in after him, and I could not wrestle with the sea because the sea was death. It was very clear. It was a force I could not have imagined. It was so powerful and so steady, and it did not touch me, but it was pulling him away, and he wasn't ready. He was so scared. So I helped him come back to shore, and they're standing in the tree line at shore were the bee priestesses. And they said, "We've got it from here." That night, while I was dreaming, my father almost died from his lungs filling up with water, but he had not been able to say goodbye to his daughters. So he waited. And then my 1-year-old daughter, while my father was taking his last breath and crying his last tear, was in the room saying, "Hello, hi, hello, hello." And that's how I knew. It's like, it's one thing to hear the stories, but another thing to be in those threshold moments. Aditi, like you said, I know what's happening here. I don't need someone to tell me because I'm in it. And I think that's what happens with liminal moments is we might not be able to frame the question and say, well, it's this, and this just happened, but there's a knowing in those moments that we try to tell the story of later, never quite manage, but it's in us. And I think that's the power of touching those thresholds. Yeah.
Y'all, this is so, I want to stay. I mean, we can't stay here all night, and I really want to. Like, can we do this again? Because there's just so much in what each one of you has said. Like, every word, I'm like just taking it in, not in an extractive way, but like, oh, resonant way, like that, like, oh, yes, that. So thank you so much. I love the different ways we've touched into some of the themes from tonight, and also the power of story too, and then the synchronicities between the stories as well. And I wonder, Andy, if we want to open it up for if there are any questions from the lovely Hive that is here, who's here, to see if anyone has a question. I don't know if you have received any, Andy.
Yeah, I can check, but I did have one that occurred to me while listening to all of your wisdom just now. Where maybe we can just do a quick round robin among the four of you. Where are you seeing the power of the hive, the human hive, right now? Before we jumped on this call, Omisade, for example, reported to us what's going on in Durham right now with ice sweeps. Doesn't necessarily have to be that, but I'm just curious to hear from each of you recently. Where are you seeing those moments where the human hive has been powerful?
Well, I would like to lift that up really quickly. So I know that folk have probably been paying attention to ICE's arrival in Charlotte, and then they've made their way to the Triangle area. And absolutely, there have been very much hive formations. I think both Hive, and I've also been thinking very much about murmuration too. Like you, Aurelia, I am an absolute nerd about the natural world and what we perceive to be supernatural only because our minds can't actually wrap it around what we're experiencing. It's like I don't think it's actually supernatural. I just think it's like beyond the boundary of natural, and so you're just kind of freaking out a little bit. And so absolutely, the way that this community is vigilant about each other's safety, and protecting each other. And I experienced that with bees, the protective nature of bees. Like, what is the home place? What is my job? I'm protecting our home place, and I'm protecting who? Our queen. So let's make sure that the queen is the Bull City. Everybody who resides in the Bull City is the queen. So we are all protecting the Bull City. And so That means that information is going out. There are some people who are outside in spaces, monitoring, watching, protecting. And there are those of us who are also inside who are holding space for spiritual hygiene, for information, for somatics, for all of that. So we're very much clear about our roles, and they're fluid, they're adaptive, because there are some of us who are like, all right, I've been doing this. I'm ready to transition into this role, and folk make room for that person to transition into that role. And I think that's very powerful in terms of my limited understanding of the nature of hives and how bees function. And I said to someone that one of my favorite movies and books is The Secret Life of Bees, and how this little girl who needed protection, who arrived unknown to this family of Black women who were beekeepers, and they took her in. And they also had their own religion that existed outside of a religious practice, but it was, I think, definitely a Southern practice. And I love that story. I love that book, and I love the way that analogy shows up of, you need a safe harbor, you need sanctuary. And if you need sanctuary, we can provide you with sanctuary. So that's one thing that I've been thinking about as it relates to how I see hives functioning. Another way that I see it functioning, and I know I sound like a broken record, but is in this menopausal multiverse that has been emergent, and it's not the landscape. So the menopausal landscape is very white, cis hetero, middle class, upper middle class women who gender identify as cis, who identify as heterosexual, who may or may not have affluence or influence. But the multiverse is non-binary. The multiverse is expansive. The multiverse is a hive where people who have gone through menopause and understand what that means, whether they went through menopause because of gender affirming care in their 20s and they had a full hysterectomy to be in alignment with their gender identity, who are now ancestors, or not ancestors, who are now elders. There's this thing that we have around eldership and aging. It is not a foregone conclusion that when you get older that you will be an elder, because there is, I think, a necessity around not only wisdom, but humility, a willingness to lead, and a willingness to learn, and a willingness to be humble. And I think that some of those characteristics don't always exist in someone who has chronological age. It might exist in someone who's much younger. And so this idea of eldership attached to aging, I don't necessarily think is a thing that I think we should tease that out. And so what I'm seeing emerge are trans elders who have gone through menopause, becoming this mother hive for the daughter hive, or for the nibbling hive, or the sibling hive, or the offspring hive, right? There's a parent hive that says, I've walked this journey. I know how to do this. And I'm going to make space for you to exist in this, and then birth to a new thing. And I'm seeing that happen. It's emergent. I think that the world that we're living in is a postmenopausal celestial body. And we are birthing a whole new world. Where we are right now, this apocalypse, I also saw someone say that this is really not an apocalypse. It's actually an Armageddon. There are all of these kind of like, Abrahamic kind of like descriptors for chaos that is birthing a new world. And I do think that the hives are present. I'm seeing so many communities, seeing so many artists, creatives, somatic practitioners, writers who are stewarding us into a new world with encouragement, with questions, with audacity. And so I think that that's what I'm seeing happening in terms of like at a everything's fractal, right? And I imagine that beehives are fractal as well. And so the fractal nature of a hive is that what we're seeing at a community level is also at this meta larger level, universal cosmic level, that we are birthing a new thing. And to birth something new, like you said, it has to die. And this world is dying. The way that we have existed, the way we understand things, it is dying. And we have died multiple times. This is not like, oh, it's the end of the world. It's the end of the world as we know it. Everybody knows that song. It has happened multiple times. And this is our time to witness this death. And how are we going to participate and be a part of it? So that's what I think is happening. Yeah.
Thank you, Omisade. Ariella and Aditi. Yeah.
It just really hits home. Thank you for sharing that. I don't even know if I can embellish too much on it. I've been feeling this for a long time, this sense of watching the old order crumble, and the dying throes of a system that no longer works. And a hive, you've got it. That's what a hive has. Everyone has a job, and something I really noticed because I float in some of the communities of, you could say, spiritual communities or people seeking deeper connection to something. And I've been noticing sort of two directions, and one is sort of the solo enlightenment path, and that's becoming less and less and less of the path, and more people are really actually looking for interconnection and presence, and how, for instance, their path can be also a form of activism, and how their spiritual path can be going to that protest because it needs to be done, all while everything falls apart around us. So there's this real quality of, it gets a little bit uglier before the new thing comes through. I don't know, like if you've ever been through a birth of any sort, physical or otherwise, that there's that point where you're like, oh, I'm actually gonna die now. This is where I die. Like, I don't go to the other side. It's true, you don't, because some part of you has to die in order to get through to that other side, especially if you've experienced birthing and physically. There's just that moment. So, I think it's just one example of the many ways that we do it. But I'm finding, to make the point, I'm finding less and less people ask, what is my individual purpose? And I'm finding more and more people asking, what are we doing together? Because the individual journey is the collective journey, and we're starting to remember that. And that is how I think we're starting to be more like a hive. Yeah.
Yeah. The time of the lone wolf is over, prophecy says, and that resonates deeply. And that's been my experience when I think of the hive. Andy, to answer your question too, it's, we in the Western North Carolina region experienced Hurricane Helene last year. And it's right before the election. And to see consciousness and compassion in action, and to see the ways we came together as a hive, even if we didn't know our neighbors before, we sure did after that. And so that was like a very potent time, and obvious example of how community came together and supported one another. And then every day at the sanctuary, the Center for Conscious Living and Dying, I think we have 300 volunteers that are just devoting their time, extra time and energy to service for those who are dying and their families, and tending to the land and supporting in all the ways. Somebody just asked me today, how can I get involved? I'm terrified of death, but I want to support and I want to kind of explore this. And, she can water plants. I invited her to do that, So what does revillaging really look like in our modern world? That's something I'm exploring and curious about. But how we each, like you said, everyone has a role. Like, what if we each deeply listen and show up with our gifts and in the community setting, and what does that look like? And it's powerful to not look outside ourselves for our leader. I reference this Hopi prophecy often because it resonates so deeply. But how can we come together as the we, not the I? It's a beautiful question, and realization and awareness of what's happening in our community, at least.
Can I ask you both a question? I'm sorry, Michelle.
Oh.
No, this is a question about this hungry robber bee.
Yeah.
Because I also see, I think that both you all talking about that tonight, like, oh, is this a hungry bee? Is this a hungry hive? Are these robber bees? What am I witnessing? Is there a transitioning happening? And I think I'm also seeing that play itself out And it wasn't until you both talked about that tonight that I was like, well, wait a minute. I need to understand a little bit more about the distinction and not to villainize the hungry
Right.
bee or the robber bee, because that's not what I want to do. I want to understand. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that in Ifa theology, there is a belief that when a person makes a transition, if they are separated from their family, separated from their culture, separated from their community, the likelihood that their soul will make its ascension in a way that allows them to really be at rest can get disrupted. And then the longer that they are separated from that, they become wild rogue energies that can mimic other ancestors. So oftentimes people will say, oh, well, be careful when you're out at night. Be careful when this is happening. Be careful when this is happening, because what you might actually be encountering, and I know that they talk about this in Appalachia all the time about mimics. We don't call it a mimic, we call it an ajagun. And an ajagun is a dead or a transitioned human being who's been so long from their human experience, but they're earthbound. They're tethered to the earth. They have not ascended, and they wreak havoc. And so and again, I don't think of them as villainous. I think of them as rogue.
Mhm.
They can cause problems, and you have to assert yourself. You have to be like, this is not your home. You don't belong here, so you need to move along. It's almost like, I don't know if you've ever had this experience when you were younger. You go to a party and there's a person there, and no one actually knows who this person is. And they're just kind of like hanging out, drinking, eating all the food. And whoever's throwing the party starts going, did you bring this person? And finally you realize no one knows who this person is. And so you say to this person, I'm gonna need you to leave. You're not actually welcome here. And they go, you got me. And then they leave. That's kind of like a very tame version of that. But I digress. I'm very curious, Michelle and Aurelia, how would you describe this hungry bee?
I can thank you for bringing that up. I can speak to that. And I also know we're close to time. And it's an important question because even when I described them, I said robber or hungry because I'm thinking of them as hungry bees who are preparing for the winter. And calling them robber bees, which is what people have called them to me, is it doesn't feel representative of the picture. Like, why would they be seeking resources from other hives? Because of what humans have done to the more than human world that has affected their ability to have enough resources to make it through the long dark and winter. Like, I feel like that context is important. And I've heard you, Ariella, speak to, and I've witnessed this, and it really helped me when I first heard you speak to this, that sometimes other bees sense when a hive is transitioning. And to quicken that transition, they might go and gather the resources from that hive. It is, to my eyes, right, in this physical realm, it's really violent to watch. Like, they were rolling around in front of the hive the other day. They were fighting. They were protecting their hive, and I was trying, and then bringing in pollen. And I was like, what is happening here? Something's imbalanced. And so I think when we see hungry bees or any version of that, something's not in balance. Something needs attention. And in this case, specifically to bees who might be seeking other resources, it's really human impact on the climate, which is really what the third part of the series is about, right? It's the impact humans have made on the climate that affects every part of the more than human world. And so that's how I think of them, as hungry bees, and that mirror, Ariella, that you shared earlier.
I know we're right at time. I'll just add to that. That's exactly it. What I will add, thinking about what you've just said, Omisade, is that there's this other factor of globalization and the movement of hives. Hives live in trees and caves, so we've been moving them all over the world. We started moving them across the world, and with that came a parasitic mite that belonged to a different kind of bee, that belonged to a bee in Asia. And there's nothing wrong with this mite, the varroa mite. It has a job, it has a place. But in the bees, in the Apis mellifera bees, the kind that most people keep in the Western world and that came out of Africa and moved up into Europe long time ago. These bees are not adapted yet to this parasite. And the reason a hive is typically dying and another hive can sense it is because they are overcome from the multiple viruses that come as a result of being exposed to these vectors of disease. So is it the robber bees that are the issue, or is it that there's an imbalance in something that humans brought in that is acting like, that is feeding off those bees, like literally feeding off the immune system of those bees, that is causing them to be subjected to viruses? So do what you will with that. Also, I don't demonize Varroa. It just is out of place, like a spirit that's out of place. It's just not in its right place. It hasn't adapted yet to how we're going to do this whole together. So I'll add that piece into what we're looking at.
Thank you, Ariella. And again, for Omisade for asking the question, because I think it speaks to many of the themes, birth and death and liminality and destruction, and also what we can see with our eyes, but what else is present working between those realms? Like, what can't I see because I'm in a human body observing the more than human world or the honeybees, right? I think I know what's going on. And yet there are layers I will never understand. And being open to that, right? Yeah, I know we're at time, and I want to thank you all for such a rich conversation. I feel like I time traveled during it, and I love that. And I love you all, and I'm so glad we got to be in this hive and community in this way, all of the medicine and brilliance and everyone who joined us. And although we're at time and I won't lead a practice, I'll just invite us to take a breath together, to take a deep breath in, that newness, that birth, and a deep breath out, the acknowledgement that there's shedding and death, and to be in that cycle of our breath as we begin to transition out of this space. And just a deep bow of gratitude to everyone who has been here and journeyed with us this evening, and to Let's Meet Reimagine for hosting this kind of space.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you, Ariella. And thank you, Omisade. And thank you, Aditi, for your wisdom, for your compassion. I have a few announcements to make, which really pale to what I just heard previously. So please bear with me as I tell you about what I think is an exciting project that we have at Reimagine. Over the years, one piece of feedback we've received is that after having an experience like this, people want to stay connected and keep exploring topics together like this. So we're inviting you all to the Reimagine Growth platform. It's a safe space that we've built for that. It's technology for healing and growth instead of whatever else is happening on social media. You will be an early user of this new tool. It's for social journaling. It's for holding space for one another's stories, and taking growth journeys curated by amazing experts. On the platform, you share your journey through reflections, creations, dreams, Ariella, actions, and you can offer and receive support by holding space, which is a unique feature on this platform. Because you are here today with us, thank you. You are part of this community, so please consider joining this platform through one of our growth journey pathways. It's a journey rooted in what's known as post-traumatic growth, this idea that you move from grief into growth. Of course, we tell people if you need to sit with your grief, as long as it takes, but there is this opportunity for growth as well. So the pathway is called Reimagine Life's Challenges. It's totally free, and you get to control what and how you share. So we'd love for you to beta test this. So Nicole will paste a link in the chat on how to join this. We hope you do so. You can begin the pathway whenever you're ready. And thank you for doing that. And also, I want to share some announcements. Join us for the final session of Wisdom of the Hive that Michelle mentioned. Our guests include thanabotanist Cole Imperi. She'll teach you all about grief gardens. We've got Naomi Ortiz, who will share rituals for climate change. We have Laura Schmidt, who's author of How to Live in a Chaotic Climate, 10 Steps to Reconnect with Ourselves, our communities, and our planet. And the musician Ale will perform and tell us about the importance of whales, both the marine mammal and the whaling that's much needed in public that we don't have enough of. And in the next several months, we're promoting other events hosted by our community of Reimagine collaborators. Michelle is one of them. And we also have Sasha Soroff and Reverend Jessica Sharp. So please check out those. Nicole will paste a link in the chat to register for the Wisdom of the Hive events. And one more event that I want to spotlight before we go, our capstone event for 2025. This year in grief, next year in hope. It's on December 3rd. We'll be hearing from 7 luminaries in grief, spirituality, creativity, and personal development. And we'll provide a space for all of you to reflect on what you've all been mourning in 2025 and to name what we're yearning for and dreaming for in 2026. There'll be music, there'll be poetry, there'll be ritual. So join us for that. And with that, can we all please do a little waggle dance to thank our speakers tonight? Thank you.
Andy loves the waggle dance. Thank you, Andy.
Have a good night, everyone. Thanks again. See you soon.
Take care, everyone.